The movie Calvary is an unsettling one to say the least. Set in Ireland post-abuse crisis, the movie is a who's who of anger, disillusionment, trauma, irreverence, and downright hatred towards the church. It opens with a priest being told that an abuse victim is going to kill him in a week's time, and it only goes downhill from there. The priest's dog is killed, the church is burnt down, and all level of vitriol is directed toward him as a person. Yeah, it is not a lighthearted movie. And yet despite all of that, despite the hatred and the violence and the horribly sad way that the movie ends, which I will not spoil, there is one scene that has gotten under my skin since the first time I saw it.
Most of those cases were 40 or 50 years ago. Raking up old ground, it always seemed to me. Time to forgive and forget.
I agree. What's past is past. Time to move on, etc., etc.
For nearly 2 hours, the viewer is offered a window into the soul of a nation torn apart by the church's sexual abuse. We see people lost and hurt, still reeling from the betrayal they've incurred, filled with resentment, hatred, misery, and despair. And then there's the church, unrepentant, without empathy, treating itself like the victim. Raking up old ground, time to forgive and forget. Basically, haven't we suffered enough? It's really time for people to get over this already. It wasn't that big of a deal. I know that the end of the movie is the height of the narrative's tension and by far more dramatic, but this right here is the crux of the movie. This is the ethos of the film summed up in just one scene, the essential message it hopes to tell. In the midst of suffering, many just want to forgive and forget. Now for many, this might seem like the goal. You can't hold a grudge forever, you can't let yourself be burdened by the sins of others for the rest of your life, so just let go. As Christians, we are a people, it would seem, that should be championing this attitude, encouraging everyone to forgive their enemies, forget the ways they've been wronged, and seek reconciliation with all people. Isn't that what we want? I'm not so sure. In certain situations, meant in very particular ways, it is by no means the worst thing to say. Good might even come from it. To someone far removed from their trauma, continuing to suffer from past hurts, I can entirely understand why this might seem like practical wisdom. We want to live in the future, not the present. We don't want our past sins, our past wounds to have a grip on us. Christ conquers all, so it's possible that what we need in certain situations is to forgive and forget that it ever happened. Let go, move on, and be free. And maybe in the kingdom of heaven, we'll be able to experience that freedom fully. Maybe there will come a time where a perfect society arises and we'll be able to forgive and forget, completely erasing past hurts from our memory without any issue. It's possible. For now though, on this earth, with our fallen yet unredeemed selves, I think it's just a feel-good cliche that leaves us worse off in the end. And I'm not the only one. In his 2020 encyclical letter Fratelli Tutti on fraternity and social friendship, Pope Francis teaches forgetting is never the answer. Certain things must always be remembered. Certain atrocities should live forever in our memories. The Holocaust, the dropping of atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, persecutions, slave trades, ethnic killings. As awful as these acts of humanity are, and as much as we'd love to bury them to history, he tells us that we must never, ever forget them. They need to be remembered always and ever anew. We must never grow accustomed or inured to them. For Francis, to forget the evil we've done as a people is to open ourselves up to repeating it. In our prayer for mercy before God, we should recount the horror that we've done and has been done to us, not to wallow in our pain or to continue to suffer from it, but so that we may not fall into the same trap as before. Never again, Lord, never again. That is our prayer. A few years ago, I saw an interview with an athlete who had just done jail time for some heinous crime he'd committed. He had broken the law, humiliated himself, spent over a year in jail, and completely tarnished his reputation, but was trying to turn his life around. The reporter asked him, "Aren't you tired of talking about this? Don't you wish people would just forget about what you did?" "No," he said. "I hope people never forget what I did. What I did was wrong and people should remember that. I hope people learn from my mistakes and remember me as someone who did something horrible, but because of that, dedicated his life to doing good." Now, I'm sure he was coached up for this sort of question. I'm sure he was prepared, and it might have even been staged. I don't know. But that's the answer right there. That's it. No, we should never forget. Not only are these the moments that we should learn from so that we never commit them again, these are the moments when forgiveness and redemption are shown to be possible. It might sound somewhat contradictory at first, but I think that when we forgive and forget, we don't just forget the horrible thing that happened, we forget the incredible forgiveness that was allowed to take place. If there is no memory of sin, no memory of hurt, no memory of the atrocities that seem impossible to forgive, then there will also be no memory of the power of God to overcome the sin and hurt and atrocities. While the natural reaction might be to seek revenge, to get even, to do to others exactly what they've done to us, Pope Francis reminds us of the heroism of those who are able to forgive. I think not only of the need to remember the atrocities, but also all of those who, amid such great inhumanity and corruption, retained their dignity, and with gestures small or large, chose the part of solidarity, forgiveness, and fraternity. To remember goodness is also a healthy thing. I'm reminded of the horrible case a few years back when an off-duty police officer entered an apartment thinking that it was hers, saw a man inside, and thinking that she was being robbed, fatally shot him. Can you imagine the pain his family must have felt? It's absolutely gut-wrenching, and it would have been entirely justifiable if they had gone to their graves with hate for this woman. But they didn't. When the woman was convicted of murder, the man's brother hugged her and said, "I forgive you and I love you." I'm guessing he is never going to forget what happened to his brother. But I'm also guessing that he wants you to never forget what he did for that woman. If you forget the sin, you will never remember the mercy. Now, this does not mean, however, that one is obligated to forgive immediately or that people who cause us great harm should be let off the hook, as it were. As Pope Francis says, this does not mean impunity. Just because we're able to forgive someone does not mean that we forego justice. Justice ensures the safety of the innocent and calls the guilty to conversion. It maintains order in society and calls others to just action. What we do forgo is retaliation. What we do avoid is revenge. These things do not bring satisfaction. The only thing that can bring lasting peace, Francis teaches, is forgiving but not forgetting, letting go of the pain that weighs upon us, but ensuring that it can never happen again. Those who truly forgive do not forget. Instead, they choose not to yield the same destructive force that caused them so much suffering. They break the vicious cycle. They halt the advance of the forces of destruction. They choose not to spread in society the spirit of revenge that will sooner or later return to take its toll. In other words, you can forgive someone without trusting that they'll never do it again. You can let your wounds heal while at the same time protecting yourself in the future, taking measures to ensure that your attacker cannot attack again. This isn't revenge. This isn't holding a petty grudge. It's learning from the past to ensure that certain things can never happen again. Never again, Lord. Never again. When I watch the movie Calvary and see the spineless priest talking about forgiving and forgetting, I'm reminded of the horrible things that our church has been responsible for over the years. Things that I would like to forget, but cannot. There's something inside me that says, remember this. Remember this so that it never happens again. Never again should a child be abused by a priest. Never again should the church condone the forceful stripping of one's family or culture in the name of God. Never again should Christians be forced to convert under threat of death. No, never again. I hope that we will one day be forgiven for the sins of sick priests and misguided bishops. I hope that we will one day be forgiven for our part in residential schools. I hope that we will one day be forgiven for our actions in the slave trade, colonization of peoples, the Inquisitions, the Crusades, and anything else that we have done. But I also hope that the world never forgets. I hope that we never forget. And in doing so, it forces me to look at my own life. It forces me to ask, what have I done to others that I wish to forget? What have others done to me? It's easy to point blame at the church, easy to remember the ills of a whole society. What about me? How have I hurt and been hurt? What grudges am I clinging to, wounds that I refuse to let heal? Are there things in my life that I'm trying to forget without first forgiving? For me, the priest represents more than just an unrepentant clergyman. He is a mirror to each of us when we choose to hide from evil, to bury it, to let it fester unresolved. He is the one that knows something is wrong and yet chooses to forget rather than forgive. This cannot be. This is not the way of Christ. True disciples of Christ do not seek revenge, and we do not hide from our mistakes. We live in the hope that there is nothing that can keep a repentant sinner from God. We forgive, and we are forgiven. And that is nothing we want to forget.